Have you ever stopped to think about the impact that an encounter between two human species could have on the future of our history? Imagine the clash between Theo Wise Man and the Neanderthal, two species with distinct cultures, behaviors, and intelligences. What was supposed to be a simple encounter between these civilizations ended up shaping who we are today, altering our evolution, our genetic inheritance, even our cognitive abilities. But what really happened during this encounter? How did this interaction affect both species? Now, more than ever, we have access to scientific discoveries that reveal fascinating details about this historical moment and the role that Neanderthals played in our formation. Did you know that part of our DNA carries traces of this coexistence? If you're curious to learn more about this forbidden connection between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, read on and discover how their story and ours was forever changed. And don't forget, if this fascinating topic intrigues you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay up to date with more incredible content about human evolution and other stories from our past. Have you ever stopped to imagine what happened when Homo sapiens and Neanderthals shared the same space for thousands of years? It sounds like a science fiction scenario, but it was very real. The coexistence of these two human species at the same time not only challenged the traditional view of evolution, but also profoundly affected the path humanity followed. During this period, interactions between them were complex, sometimes cooperative, sometimes confrontational. The simple fact that they shared territory may have driven advances in culture, such as the exchange of knowledge about tools or hunting habits. These encounters between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were not just a matter of surviving in the same environment, but of evolving together, albeit in different ways. Evidence shows that, contrary to what was previously thought, these encounters were not simply conflicts. Rather, they were exchanges of flithic technology, for example, may have been a key factor in the development of both. The ability to create more efficient stone tools, like those produced by Neanderthals, could have been passed from one species to the other, accelerating the evolutionary process and enriching the cultural heritage of both groups. It's fascinating to see how the interaction between these two species may have shaped our own evolution. For Neanderthals, the encounter with Homo sapiens was not simply a matter of a struggle for survival. It was possibly a factor that influenced their own evolution, whether through adaptation to new conditions or through assimilation of sapiens' cultural practices. By looking at our past, we can understand how these complex interactions may have helped build human society as we know it today, with incredible cultural diversity and evolutionary capabilities. When you think about genetic inheritance, what comes to mind? Maybe physical characteristics or personality traits. But what if I told you that by looking at your DNA, you might find traces of an ancient coexistence? Modern research has revealed that, yes, many of us carry part of the legacy of Neanderthals in our genetic material. Up to 2 of the DNA of people of non-African descent comes directly from our prehistoric cousins. And the most impressive thing is that this legacy isn't limited to visible traits, but also influences our health and resistance to disease. You might be wondering, but what does this really mean for us today? Well, this genetic heritage offers us a deeper understanding of how Neanderthals helped shape our biology. Some studies suggest that their genes may have given us resistance to diseases like the flu, or even a greater ability to absorb certain nutrients, like vitamin D. More than that, some behavioral traits can also be attributed to this biological crossover, perhaps a greater propensity for interaction, social, or certain patterns off culture that transcend generations. The impact of genetics Neanderthal are undoubtedly a fascinating point in our evolution. The intersection of 2 such distinct worlds resulted in something unique that remains with us to this day. If you think it's something distant, think again the next time you feel a cold, or perhaps better able to cope with stress. This might be it. Heritage ancestor doing its silent work. What followed from this genetic mix is a reflection of our adaptability. Proof that evolution is not a straight line, but an interweaving of several cultures and influences over time. The idea that the Neanderthals are simple, without a culture complex, has always been a prevailing view. But what if I told you that this image is beginning to be challenged? Recent discoveries show that these ancient humans did, indeed, possess a symbolist man artistic expressions. From cave markings to personal ornaments, such as perforated shells and animal teeth, Neanderthals demonstrated an ability to create meaningful objects. This suggests they possessed a form of communication and symbolic representation that went beyond mere survival. Imagine yourself in a cave thousands of years ago. Instead of just hunting and seeking shelter, the Neanderthals are also creating art on the walls, using natural pigments, perhaps in search of some spiritual or ritualistic connection. These rituals may have played a crucial role in the social and emotional life of these groups. Like Homo sapiens, Neanderthals had interaction-deep connection with their environment and with others, using symbols to express their beliefs, fears, and hopes, which was a fundamental contribution to the evolution cultural. These findings, although controversial, make us rethink many of our preconceived ideas about Neanderthal. The truth is that they were much more sophisticated than we imagined. By developing Gundala rituals, show that the human capacity to symbolize the world around us is essential to our heritage yet cultural. Although these early humans may not have left written records, their artistic and spiritual expressions are proof that the search for meaning transcends the barriers of time, connecting us directly to these ancestors from a distant past. What causes a species to go extinct? It's not a simple question, but in the case of Neanderthal, climate was one of the biggest factors. During the last ice age, climate change made the environment more hostile, and Neanderthals had to face extreme cold conditions and resource scarcity. Unlike Homo sapiens, who demonstrated a greater capacity for adaptation, Neanderthals appear to have been unable to survive these climatic fluctuations, which may have accelerated their extinction. In addition to climate change, variability of the ice ages were a real challenge. The alternation between periods of intense cold and thawing drastically altered ecosystems. While some species adapted quickly, others were not so lucky. In this scenario, technologies developed by Neanderthals, although advanced with time, may not have been sufficient to deal with the instability of the environment. The extinction, then, was not a sudden death, but a gradual process in which factors such as climate competition with other species was accumulating. Climate change has not only affected fauna and flora, but has also impacted the way in which cultures Neanderthal evolved. Dwindling food supplies and the difficulty of finding adequate shelter may have hampered their social networks and the transmission of knowledge vital to survival. Ultimately, the extinction of the Neanderthals, while caused by a variety of factors, was a direct consequence of their inability to adapt to a constantly changing environment. This serves as a reminder of how interactions between species and the environment have the power to determine the fate of an entire lineage. Imagine the scene: two groups of humans with different physical and behavioral characteristics meet for the first time. The clash between a wise man and Neanderthals must have been a time of great tension. Each group brought with them its own worldview, its own survival strategies, and possibly even distinct cultures. This interaction, it may not have been peaceful all the time, but we also cannot rule out the possibility of an exchange of knowledge, tools, even social practices that could have helped both groups thrive together for a time. When the two species met, communication was undoubtedly a challenge. Neanderthals and a wise man had different ways of perceiving and interacting with the environment, and this included communication. Some scientists suggest that Neanderthal language may have been simpler, based on sounds or gestures, while Homo sapiens developed a more complex language. However, this does not mean that interaction were impossible. After all, human beings from any era have an impressive ability to adapt and use what they have at hand to communicate and resolve conflicts. This clash of civilizations is fascinating because we can see that beyond the obvious differences, the two species share important similarities. Both used lithic technology and probably had some form of symbolism. It may be that initial contact was an opportunity for both species to learn from each other, even if through trial and error. The coexistence between these two human lineages shows us that no matter how much Neanderthals have not survived, the impact of this interaction in our own evolution is undeniable. The question of how Neanderthals communicated has always sparked heated debate among scientists. When we think of the idea of language, many of us associate it with complex sentences and refined vocabulary. But did Neanderthals have a simpler form of communication, based on gestures or guttural sounds, or was their language more complex than we imagine? The clues are limited, but some discoveries, such as the development of the vocal tract and the shape of the skull, suggest that Neanderthals may have been capable of producing complex sounds, perhaps even words. Now, imagine Neanderthals in their daily lives. They use sounds and gestures to hunt, protect themselves, and interact with other members of their group. Their communication may have been much closer to a code of signs than to a structured language like ours. However, this simplicity doesn't diminish their cognitive complexity. Social interaction was fundamental to survival, and however different their communication was from ours, it certainly involved a form of culture shared. Neanderthals needed to understand each other to organize activities, such as group hunting, or to pass on vital knowledge for everyday life. The question, "Of language Neanderthal?" makes us reflect on the very evolution of human communication. If we consider that Neanderthals left no written records or oral narratives, communication between them may have been more focused on immediate and concrete expressions. However, this does not mean that their symbolism or their ability to organize socially was limited. The transition from simple sounds to the creation of more complex language could have been a natural step had the species continued to evolve. What we do know is that Neanderthals, like us, were deeply social beings, and communication was undoubtedly a fundamental part of their survival. What comes to your mind when you think about Neanderthal? Perhaps the image of brutish individuals, concerned only with hunting and survival. But surprisingly, archaeological evidence reveals a completely different view. Neanderthals not only hunted and protected themselves, but also demonstrated an impressive sense of care with members of their group. Neanderthal bones found in excavations show clear signs of healed wounds, suggesting that these individuals were cared for by others after severe injuries. This challenges the idea that they were callous or lacking in empathy. These signs of social care indicate a complex social structure where Neanderthals likely share responsibilities, including caring for the sick and injured. This type of interaction is a strong indication that relationships within the group were more sophisticated than simply surviving together. Heritage Neanderthal culture, in this sense, may have included practices of mutual aid, such as gathering food for those unable to hunt or creating safer shelters for the most vulnerable. Their society was not just about physical survival, but also about emotional and communal support. This care for the group members leads us to rethink our own evolution human social. The fact that Neanderthals developed such a deep support system among themselves suggests that they were, in fact, much more like us than we imagined. This cooperative behavior, essential for the continuity of the species, may have been one of the reasons why Homo sapiens and Neanderthals coexisted for so long. Perhaps, by observing each other caring for their own, they learned to deal with life's difficulties more empathetically, something that would be reflected in culture sand in the social practices of both groups. When we think about the encounter between a wise man and Neanderthal, it's easy to imagine a battle for territory, a direct confrontation between two species seeking survival. However, what science shows us is that beyond disputes, there was an interaction, much deeper connection between them. Genetic studies indicate that the two species not only coexisted, but also interbred biologically. When Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, they were already meeting and interbreeding with Neanderthals, leaving traces of this fusion in our genes. This genetic exchange was not just a curiosity, but an important factor in our evolution. This biological fusion had implications beyond the simple exchange of genetic material. Over time, Neanderthal physical characteristics and behaviors likely integrated into the gene pool of a wise man, influencing our ability to adapt to different environments and conditions. What makes this relationship even more fascinating is the fact that, at the same time as biological assimilation occurred, culture each species must have left distinct behavioral traits in its descendants. The presence of Neanderthal genes in us can help us understand, for example, our resistance to disease, or even some behavioral tendencies. This biological encounter, as unusual as it may seem, reveals something profound about human nature. The fusion was not only physical, but also cultural. Imagine how social practices and lithic technology of Neanderthals could have influenced the behavior and abilities of our ancestors, or how the symbolism present in both cultures could have merged over time, creating a complex network of interactions and exchanges. What we do know is that the coexistence and consequent fusion between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals helped shape modern humans as we know them today. When we think about lithic technology, it is natural to associate this term with rudimentary stone tools used by early humans. But the truth is that the technologies developed by Neanderthals are more sophisticated than we imagine. Archaeological evidence shows that although Neanderthals did not create the same types of tools as Homo sapiens, their skills, their ability to create stone tools was impressive. Using advanced techniques, such as the production of thin blades and multifunctional tools, they demonstrated a great capacity for adapting to their environment and innovating to survive. These tools weren't just for hunting or cutting food. Neanderthals also used sharpened stones to make other tools, such as needles and even natural adhesives. This latest find is particularly intriguing, as it suggests an unexpected level of sophistication in their work. Technology. When we begin to look at Neanderthal tools, we see that the transition from a simple chipped stone to a more complex tool is a clear indication of their intellectual capacity. The influence of these technologies extended beyond Neanderthals, possibly affecting the wise man when the two species met and exchanged knowledge. This ability to produce tools not only reflects the evolution of the technical capabilities of Neanderthals, but also a possible exchange of knowledge with Homo sapiens. The interaction between the two species may have contributed to the spread of tool-making techniques, improving both cultures. The mixture of innovations of Neanderthals with those of sapiens probably resulted in even more advanced technologies, which helped drive human progress toward the creation of tools and strategies more efficient for hunting, defense, and survival. The extinction of Neanderthals has always been one of the greatest mysteries of human evolution. Did they disappear suddenly, or was it a gradual process caused by complex factors? Many scholars believe that the end of the Neanderthals was not a single event, but rather a slow death. Competition with a wise man, climate change, and resource scarcity created an increasingly hostile environment. Despite their resilience and adaptability, Neanderthals likely faced continued pressure to survive, leading to their gradual decline until their complete disappearance. Still, some evidence suggests that the Neanderthal extinction may have been more sudden than we imagined. The arrival of a wise man to Europe, with its more effective technologies and hunting strategies, may have initiated a competitive pressure that the Neanderthals were unable to overcome. Furthermore, climate change dramatic events, such as the end of the last ice age, may also have drastically affected the fauna and flora, making it harder for Neanderthals to find the resources they needed to survive. Although the extinction was a complex process, direct competition and environmental challenges played a key role. The extinction of the Neanderthals serves as a reminder of how evolution can be unpredictable and often cruel. When we think about extinction, we're not just talking about the death of a species, but about the end of a unique lineage of humans that shared the planet with us, Homo sapiens, for thousands of years. What remains of their heritage are genetic fragments, technologies, and cultures that have left a lasting impact on our own history. Even if their extinction, whether it was a fusion of factors, Neanderthals are still part of our journey, and understanding their end helps us reflect on the fragility of our own existence. Now that you know a little more about the Neanderthal sand, as your interaction with Theo Wise Man shaped our history, you may be wondering, and now, what do I do with this information? Well, this is the perfect time to reflect on how lessons from the past can influence our view of coexistence, evolution, and adapting to change. The story of Neanderthal Sunday Wise Man reminds us of the importance of understanding others, of valuing Garrett Jekyll, and learning from the experiences of those who came before us. So now it's up to you. What else would you like to discover about the human past? What other story about our evolution do you think still needs to be told? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this content helped you see the story in a different way, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay up to date with more fascinating content like this. Knowing our origins can be the key to a more conscious future.